In example 2D, we're going to find G composed with G in its domain. Okay. Again, this one will be more like part B, not as difficult as parts A or C. Okay. First thing, write down G of X. Okay. So we are plugging G into G. So I am going to write down my outside function, the one I'm plugging into. That's 2 over X. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug in G of X. So go ahead and circle my X. Wherever I see an X, I'm going to replace it with the inside function, which is G of X, which is also 2 over X. Okay, so you're going to end up with 2 over 2 over X. Okay, so again, it's a complex fraction, a fraction within a fraction. Okay, but this one is much easier to simplify. Okay, again, your goal is to get one fraction in the top, one fraction in the bottom. Okay, you already have one fraction in the bottom. Okay, you can make the top a fraction really easily by just sticking the 2 over 1 and then just dividing out the fractions. Okay, but before we quickly do the simplification process, remember you got to check for your bad spot. Okay, so when you look at this bottom fraction, 0 is the bad spot. Okay, it's pretty easy to eyeball. Okay, so I'm going to write out to the side, X cannot be 0. Okay, because again, the simplification process will cover this up. Okay, so now to simplify, make the top one fraction, 2 over 1, divided by the bottom, which is 2 over X. Okay, so now you're just dividing two fractions. So keep the top fraction the same, change to multiplication, flip the bottom fraction. Okay, so now you're multiplying fractions. So you go across the top and across the bottom. So this is going to be 2x over 2. And then the 2's cancel. So the composite function is just x. Okay, just x. Okay, again, it looks like 0 is something you can plug in. Okay, but you can't. It's a bad spot. Simplification process covers it up. Notice our composite function is not a fraction. It's a polynomial. So there are no additional bad spots. Okay. All right. So that is our answer here. Okay. The composite function is x. Okay. The domain is that x cannot be 0. Okay. Again, I'm not making you write it in interval notation at this point. Okay. All right. So lastly, okay, you've got parts E and F. Okay, where you're evaluating a composite function. Okay. So again, what part E means is that you're plugging 1/2 into the composite function G of G. Okay, this does not mean you're multiplying G of G by 1/2. Okay, not what it means. Your input to G of G is 1/2. Okay, so all you have to do is go back to your function G of G. We just found it. Okay, our function is x. Okay, plug in 1/2 for x. Okay, so again, we know G of x is x. Okay, so that means G of 1/2. Okay, go to this function, plug in 1/2 for x. Okay, so you're going to get 1/2. Okay. All right, and then lastly, okay, f of G of 0. Okay, all right, so this is going to be f of G of, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, I was going to go and write down the composite function. Okay, we know what this is. We found it in part A. Okay, so part A, it's 3x over 2 minus x. Oops, focus, focus. Hold on, let me get it to focus. Okay, so f of G of x, we found it in part A. It is 3x over 2 minus x. So really, all you're supposed to do is plug in, if you want this, you're supposed to plug in 0 for x, okay? But, and remember, if you do that, you're going to get 0. But what you need to remember is look what happened when we found f of G of x. This is the formula, but you cannot plug in 0 or 2. Okay, so we're actually in part F, we're trying to plug 0 in to f of G, but we know we can't plug in 0 because it's one of the bad spots. Okay, so all you need to write for this one is that f of G of 0 is undefined. because it was one of the bad spots. So you got to be careful for that, because like I said, if you didn't pay attention to that, it surely looks like you can plug in 0 to this function and you would get an output of 0, okay? But you can't do that. It is one of the bad spots. That's why you have to keep track of the bad spots, okay? So you're not actually allowed to plug that in there, okay? All right. Next example. Let me find the paper. All right, so in the next example, okay, so different example here. We're done with the fractions for now, so that's good. Okay, so example 3